Fifth level is a big one in D&D. The characters are substantially more powerful than they were at first level, even at third level. But they're still far from being epic demigods. It's sort of a balance between the gritty, local heroes vibe of early levels and the reality-bending superhero vibe of high levels. Lots of D&D campaigns go to 5th level, and some of them even begin at 5th level, or close to it. It's a sweet spot that the majority of all D&D players enjoy. On the monster side of things, challenge rating 5 is not the same thing as a 5th level character, but CR5 monsters fit in perfectly at this level of play. For some frame of reference, against a party of 4 or 5 5th level characters, a single CR5 monster is an easy encounter. A CR5 plus a CR2 monster make for a medium encounter. 1 CR5 plus 5 CR1/4 creates a hard encounter. 2 CR5 monsters makes a hard to deadly encounter, and 3 CR5s is a double deadly encounter. I love studying encounter building and monster creation. I love learning the ins and outs, mastering the rules, and then strategically breaking those rules for the sake of a great game. Oftentimes, I do like creating encounters that are more or less suitable for the character's level. But I also like having a living world, a place where the characters can potentially get in over their heads, a world that has lots of locations that have their own objective challenge levels that are independent of whatever level the party is. My only real hard rule is to never force the characters into an impossible situation that they have no way out of. In other words, never rob the players of all their agency. Hello, one and all. I'm back with a monster ranking. It's been a little while. Glad to be here. This time, we are looking at challenge rating 5 monsters for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. There are a bunch of iconic creatures at CR5, like the Werebear and the Roper and the Umber Hulk. I've included a bunch of these classic D&D monsters in here, but I've also included some more obscure monsters that you're not going to find in the monster manual or the core bestiaries. If you've noticed that I'm speaking a little bit differently in this video, it's because I'm still trying to get the formatting right. I'm still trying to make some improvements on my channel. I've noticed that in some of my recent videos, I've come across a little bit harsher than I wanted to, so I'm trying to get the delivery a little bit more calm, a little warmer. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below and tell me if you like a more relaxed and welcoming kind of tone. And while you're at it, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe if you are not already a subscriber. That kind of support really does make a difference, and it helps to stave off the sphere of annihilation that lurks at the heart of the algorithm. All right, so let's jump in. I have a bunch of monsters lined up, and they're all great in their own ways. Starting things off in F tier is the Brontosaurus. Now I know, dinosaurs are really cool. But in terms of a D&D monster, this is extremely simple. Just a big, stomping, tail-slapping brute. Only slightly more interesting is the giant crocodile, a big, biting, tail-slapping brute, except this one grabs you in a deadly grappling match and lurks in the water. That's all for F tier. No need to belabor the point. Dinos and crocs are some hardcore beasts, I know. I love them too. But in the end, they are just simplistic animals that don't get any lore in the bestiaries, and they don't even get illustrations. Bringing us into low D tier is the Boulette, or if you prefer the original pronunciation, the Boulet. The old school way of pronouncing this monster has been all but abandoned by this point, because, well, that's not how English works. Technically, that's not how French works. If you want to get that A sound at the end of the word, it needs to end with ET, as in like chalet, ricochet, buffet, ballet, etc. If you do ETTE, the sound comes out as et. So boulet would be spelled B-U-L-E-T. The et sound, ETTE, at the end, oftentimes, again, this comes from French, oftentimes that's a way to put a word into a diminutive form, such as cigarette for a little cigar, or statuette for a little statue, towelette for a little towel, or brunette as an endearing or pretty way to say brown as in a brown-haired girl. Brune, brunette. The boulette is a burrowing monster also known as a land shark. Not only does it burrow through dirt, but it is also a very powerful jumper. It has a jump attack that knocks its enemies prone while simultaneously crushing and clawing them. It's a simple-minded ambush predator that is extremely aggressive and bloodthirsty. Some scholars claim that this beastie was originally created by a mad wizard who combined a snapping turtle with an armadillo, then infused it with demon blood. Next is the Gorgon, not the Medusa-type creature as we know the Gorgon from Greek mythology, but a bull-looking monster that grows metal plates as a form of superior natural armor. This Gorgon actually originated in a book from 1607 called The History of Four-Footed Beasts by Edward Topsell. It also includes the mixed-up version of the Lamia that we find in D&D. The Gorgon is another simple brute creature. It exhales petrifying gas from its nostrils, then charges fiercely with its horns, attempting to skewer those that did not succumb to the petrification. Continuing with the theme of big dumb brutes is the hill giant. It is the lowest ordered of the true giants. Thus, it has status above the giant kin, like ogres and trolls, but it is considered inferior to frost giants, storm giants, and the like. This is a plain oaf that swings a great club and hurls rocks. It is crude and foul-tempered, and above all else, gluttonous. The Hill Giant's lore is pretty bare bones and doesn't include anything unexpected or intriguing. Shambling into mid D tier is the Shambling Mound. Another big dumb brute, this time a plant thing. It wants to grab you up and smother and crush you inside of its swampy mass. These walking compost piles spontaneously animate when either lightning or powerful fey magic infuse a heap of plant matter, and they're actually healed by lightning, just like another creature we're going to see in this ranking, the Flesh Golem. Pair an ally that casts Lightning Bolt or breathes lightning breath, and that really will take the encounter with a Shambling Mound to the next level, which is great because otherwise it's quite a simple creature. The brutes continue! Next is the Barlgura, a snarling ape-like demon filled with the savagery and brutality of the abyss. It is a pack predator that wants to rip enemies to pieces in melee with its bite and fists. It has superior climbing and jumping abilities to help it navigate terrain, as well as a reckless attack like a barbarian. It also has some innate spells, including Entangle, which makes sense for it to trap foes that it cannot reach right away, plus combines well with the jungle-like theme. Then we see it also has Invisibility, Phantasmal Force, and Disguise Self. These last two seem out of place. It's not intelligent enough to really use illusions and control spells, and they don't fit the theme of the savage jungle brute demon. Getting into high D tier is the Barbed Devil. This is the first monster in the ranking here that actually has any intelligence and personality to speak of. These devils are greedy and covetous to the extreme, and they take on any fight when treasure or some reward is on the line. They often fill the role of security guards in the Nine Hells, keeping watch with their expertise and perception. In combat, they have a relatively straightforward claw and tail attack, and they can throw fire for a ranged attack. Next we have another kind of fiend, the Mezoloth. Not a demon, not a devil, but a kind of Yugoloth. They have their own unique lore. The Mezoloth is the most common type of Yugoloth. It has an insectile, vaguely humanoid appearance. They function as shock troops whose sole motivations are violence and the reward they will get for their violence. It has decent melee attacks and a few innate spells like Dispel Magic, Darkness, and Cloud Kill. Those last two synergize perfectly with its Blind Sight and Poison immunity. It also has an at-will 60-foot teleportation action. For a low-tier fiend, this is about as good as it gets. At the top of D tier is the Odiug. This is a classic D&D monster that lurks within filth heaps and cesspits. Here we can see some of the typical traits of an aberration: tentacles and an odd number of appendages and eyes. The Odiug is a fairly simple creature. It lives in slop and scum, consuming about anything, though it prefers living creatures. It has a diseased bite and effective tentacle grabs and slams, and curiously, it possesses a manner of limited telepathy that it uses to lure prey. The monster manual is quite vague on how exactly it employs this tactic, but we creative GMs always think of something. D-tier creatures are cool in their own ways. I think of them as the island of misfit toys for D&D monsters. They're good to use here and there, but their flaws and their limitations do hold them back. Let's move on to the mid-tier creatures now. Kicking off low C tier is the Zorn. These are peculiar stone creatures from the plane of Earth, with 3 arms and 3 legs and big mouths that open up directly on top of their bodies. They have tremor sense and earth glide like a standard earth elemental. They have stone camouflage that helps them hide in rocky terrain, and a 3-claw, 1-bite multi-attack. They eat gems and precious metals, and they have a treasure sense that allows them to smell rare minerals in the same way that a bloodhound can sniff out its quarry. Zorns are unassuming creatures for the most part, just neutral aligned things that prefer to stick to their native plane, leading simple lives of eating precious stones, gold, and the like. Unlike a rust monster, the Zorn does not have any actual mechanics that allows it to quickly devour objects, but I imagine they can gulp down quite a mouthful with their incredibly wide maws. X is actually the least common letter for the names of D&D creatures. There are only 4 creatures that start with the letter X in the core bestiaries: the Zorn, the Zvart, Zvart Speaker, and the Zvart Warlock of Raxavort. And by the way, I covered the Zvarts in my humanoids ranking video, loathsome lot of scoundrels them. They're a pretty interesting and peculiar kind of creature. However, they have since been recategorized. They're no longer considered humanoids in 5e, they are monstrosities. Anyhow, let's not get too roped up and venture on to the next monster. The Roper is another classic D&D monster. Like the Piercer and the Dark Mantle, this monster can appear as a stalactite or stalagmite when motionless. It has an incredible 50-foot melee reach with its tendrils. It can attack with 4 of them per turn, which grapple and restrain targets, as well as produce a strength-sapping property that imposes disadvantage on strength-based skills, including athletics checks to try to break free. After grabbing its prey, a Roper pulls each grappled target 25 feet closer, and then it can bite one if it is adjacent. Its hide is stony and very thick, though the trade-off is that it moves incredibly slowly. Far more fantastical than a basic zombie is the Beholder zombie. Beholders are one of the most iconic D&D monsters and have some really interesting features. The zombified version is way less intelligent and less dangerous. It lacks some of the eye rays, and it lacks the infamous anti-magic gaze of the central eye. The central eye doesn't even function anymore for this one. But the Beholder zombie is still a blast to run. Pun definitely intended there. Clawing its way into mid-C tier is the Umber Hulk. It stalks through caves and other underground regions, a sort of bipedal insectoid plus something else monstrosity. It makes for a very memorable encounter. It can burrow through earth, even tunnel right through solid rock, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. Ripping through 20 feet of pure stone every 6 seconds is insane. Modern, high-powered machinery can tunnel through maybe 50 or 60 feet with an entire shift worth of work, maybe even an entire day's worth of work. The implication is that the Umber Hulk should be one of the most powerful monsters in all of D&D, able to rip through flesh and bone and armor just within instants. It should be able to tear characters to pieces in just one round. But hey, it's fantasy, right? Perhaps even more extraordinary is its confusion gaze, which can scramble the minds of foes who look upon it. This is also one of the rare creatures that speaks its own language. Umber Hulk. That's right, its language is just the same name as its species. Alrighty then. It has some shortcomings, but overall, the Umber Hulk is a really cool and really weird monster. Next up is the Wraith, a classic, shadowy, and incorporeal undead, like a malevolent ghost driven by its hatred for the living. It seeks to drain the life from creatures, especially people, whose tormented spirits arise as specters under the Wraith's control. The Wraith is definitely one of the most evil creatures in this CR range. Now we come to the core elementals, the air elemental, earth elemental, fire elemental, and water elemental. They represent either elemental spirits or base matter given form by binding magic. The air elemental has an incredibly fast fly speed, the ability to fit through tiny crevices, and a really cool whirlwind attack. The earth elemental can glide straight through natural stone and dirt, and it has the siege monster trait and tremor sense. The fire elemental can also fit through tiny openings. It can even move into other creature spaces and burn them and set them on fire whenever it does. The water elemental as well can flow through the narrowest of cracks, and it has a whelm attack, which is like a whirlpool vortex which restrains targets while battering them about and submerging them in water. These elementals are really great because of their potent and thematically flavored actions. As well, I really like their unique forms of mobility, and particularly, they have these resistances and vulnerabilities that express their purely element-based forms. As much as these core elementals are an essential part of D&D, I do miss the mixed elementals of 4th edition. Both Monster Manual 1 and 2 in 4E had a number of creatures that blended together 2 different elements to create these kind of amalgam creatures that we had never seen before in the game. Really cool stuff. Coming to us straight from Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory is the flesh golem. Is it an undead? Well, not exactly. It is composed of body parts sewn and bolted together, though it has an elemental spirit animating it, not necromantic magic. It's generally seen as more of a work of artifice than a necromancer raising zombies. This golem is a little more intelligent than most others. There can even be a slight tragic or suffering quality to it. There is a chance that the flesh golem can go berserk, though its creator can attempt to calm it down. Like other golems, it has some impressive resistances and immunities, such as being totally unharmed by weapons that aren't magical or adamantine. And as I previously mentioned, lightning actually heals it. In some ways, this is an awesome monster. Now we come to one of the most classic monsters of all, the Troll. It received first place in my top 10 D-tier monsters video, but I've since reconsidered and I now rate it as a solid mid-C-tier monster. I think I had previously undervalued its style and its versatility. Trolls are cruel, foul, violent-tempered, and flesh-eating. They are utterly savage and have no society of their own. They fight with vicious bites and claws, and their most notable trait is their regeneration, which recovers hit points at the start of each of their turns. Unless the troll is damaged by fire or acid, that regeneration just continues and continues, and the troll is nearly unstoppable. This quality that it has leads to the troll shining in some other ways. Sometimes their limbs can function independently if severed, and at other times trolls mutate due to consuming creatures that have innate magical properties. There's almost no end to the variations of troll freaks and troll mutants, which makes this otherwise simple brute really quite variable. Scurrying into high C tier is the swarm of cranium rats. As you're probably noticing, some of the creatures have 2 versions, an original version from Volo's Guide to Monsters or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and then a revised version from Monsters of the Multiverse. Sometimes the revised versions are practically identical to the originals, sometimes they're actually a bit worse, and sometimes they're better, as in the case of the Cranium Rat Swarm, because the original version had way too low of hit points and didn't do enough damage. The Cranium Rat is one of the many experiments that Mind Flayers have performed on other creatures. In this case, infusing psionic energy into regular rats, which become more intelligent and gain some kind of psionic powers. It also leaves them with these exposed, glowing brains, which does look kind of goofy, but whatever. If a bunch of cranium rats come together in a swarm, they take on a collective consciousness, which is noticeably smarter than your average human, and capable of telepathy. Along with this, it has a number of psionic-powered spells that control minds and read thoughts. This is the first creature in this ranking that really has a decent amount of potential for social interactions and the versatility to pursue different kinds of goals and different modes of being. Up next we have the Tanaruk, which is a demon orc. This monster appears when abyssal magic is used in a dark ritual to the demon lord Baphomet. The ritual involves a pregnant orc as the subject. Her child is then born as this half-fiend, which grows to be much, much stronger than a typical orc, and as we would expect, even more cruel and filled with rage. The Tanaruk not only wields handheld weapons, but attacks with bites, and it also makes high-accuracy counterattacks when it gets hit in melee. Definitely a heavy metal monster. This segues perfectly into the Cambion, another half-fiend creature. It is the offspring of a succubus and a human, though sometimes other types of fiends and humanoids can result in a Cambion. It sort of looks like a tiefling with wings, and the line blurs even more when we consider that there are actual winged tieflings. It has a few innate spells, including the incredible ability to plane shift itself, and it fights with weapons and flame rays. It also has the ability to charm people who then have to obey the Cambion's commands. It's a generalized, decently effective, half-fiend person. Cambions can sort of get lost in the shuffle when there are so many other similar things out there, but it makes sense that they would exist in the D&D cosmology, considering how much succubi seduce mortals and are able to procreate with them. Swooping into the top of C tier is the Battle Force Angel from the Ravnica campaign setting. She's associated with the Boros Legion, a militaristic faction that combines furious zeal and a dedication to justice. The Battle Force Angel is sort of like a Valkyrie, a celestial of combat and war. She flies in the vanguard alongside Sky Knights and their flying mounts, leading companies of soldiers against evil hordes. She's pretty cool, though nothing too unique. She's a fairly standard battle angel, like a flying knight in shining armor. Her sword deals additional radiant damage, and her inspiring battle cries bolster allies' attacks and saving throws, much like the Bless spell. Well, that wraps up C tier. The monsters are progressing, getting more interesting and more well-rounded. By this point, we're seeing hints and samples of the greatness to come in the high tiers. In low B tier, we have the Sahuagin, also called Sea Devils and Devilmen of the Deep. These lawful evil fish people are one of the most recognized aquatic humanoids in D&D. They typically live in the ocean, though some sects of Sahuagin, some sects of Sahuagin, dwell in underground lakes. They're connected to sharks and even worship an evil shark god called Sekolah. Sahuagin build cities within the aquatic terrain, preferably deep ocean trenches. They speak their own unique language called, Sahuagin. What is up with the D&D races just speaking languages that have the same name as the race itself? Their society is quite ordered. There is a priest caste, a large four-armed baron caste, and other sorts of roles. Ultimately, their society is cruel and cold-blooded. They're monstrous people. They regularly go out hunting and raiding, and they take no pity on the other races that they rob and attack. Their eternal enemies are sea elves, who they come into conflict with time and time again. There's a lot that can be done with the Sahuagin, and any campaign that features coastal or aquatic environments should consider featuring them in some way. Creeping out from the dreary corners of the Shadowfell is the Banderhob. This amphibian-looking monstrosity is like a nightmare boogeyman out of some dark nursery rhyme. They cross into the world, lurking around at night, seeking to gobble up targets and spirit them away to their mysterious masters back in the Shadow Realm. According to lore, a coven of hags were the ones to first create the ritual to spawn Banderhobs, but the secret got out, as secrets sometimes do, and other magic users ended up learning the process. Despite its ogreish size, a Banderhob is actually quite stealthy, and it can teleport through shadows. Its attacks revolve around biting and tongue grappling the targets, then swallowing them. It also has the ability to track down people and objects within 1 mile, as long as it possesses but a tiny piece of the target. So watch out. The Banderhob is coming to get ya. Shooting into mid-B tier is the Murder Comet. This is an obscure D&D monster, and it comes to us from Boo's Astral Menagerie. This person-sized elemental is a head made of stone and fire, created by some wicked spellcaster. It goes rocketing around through the astral sea, causing as much havoc as possible, spitting fire and smashing into creatures, objects, vehicles, structures, and anything else. Sometimes, a spellcaster goes even further and puts his own consciousness into a murder comet, thus becoming this super fast and immortal creature. Immortal, at least until something destroys it, at which point the murder comet explodes in a blast with the power of a fireball spell. We now look at the Tlinkali, a fearsome humanoid scorpion hybrid monstrosity. These scorpion folk are large size. They speak their own unique language, which is called Harakta. Just kidding. Of course, it's just lazily called Tlinkali. The Tlinkali speak Tlinkali. In combat, they fight with long swords and spiked chains, and their own deadly venomous stingers that can even leave a target paralyzed. They're desert nomads who live as hunters and scavengers, only staying in place as long as it provides for them. They tend toward the harsher side of the neutral alignment and will slay rivals and competitors without remorse. The Tlinkali have a lot of potential in my estimate, and I'd like to see more done with them. Next is the unicorn, a creature that has become extremely prevalent in pop culture, for better or worse, or really worse. In D&D, it is one of the few legendary creatures in this CR range. Something that I like to do in my games is to create legendary monsters at all of the CR ranges. This way, the characters can face dynamic, challenging, resilient boss monsters at all levels of play. When it's in the lower tiers or the lower levels, I typically just give them one legendary resistance and one legendary action. At mid-levels, they'll have one or maybe two, and then at the high levels, typically they get three, though sometimes just two legendary resistances and actions can work well. Take, for example, the Goblin Tribe Chief that I created in my March 2024 newsletter. It's CR4, it has one legendary resistance per day, and one legendary action per round, which it can either use to command an ally goblin to move an attack, or to make a spiteful strike. The Unicorn is a lordly guardian of woodland realms. It has a forest lair with regional effects, though no lair actions, which that's fine. It has legendary actions, but no legendary resistance, which I think is its worst shortcoming, as it really needs some legendary resistance due to the fact that its AC and hit points are so low. Unfortunately, it has to use up all of its 3 legendary actions to heal itself just to stay on par with some decent AC and hit points. In battle, the Unicorn charges with its horn and kicks with its hooves. It has a selection of innate spells, such as Pass Without Trace, At Will, and once per day, Calm Emotions, Entangle, and Dispel Evil and Good. It can also heal other creatures with a touch from its horn, and teleport up to 1 mile once per day. A graceful and beautiful creature, though it doesn't have quite what it takes to reach above B tier. Bursting out of its coffin is the Vampire Spawn. Vampires are some of the most amazing villain monsters of all time, not just in D&D, but across all games, books, media in general. The Vampire Spawn is not the high-powered vampire lord, not the vampire boss or sire, but the more monstrous, the less complex version that are generally thralls of the vampire lord. That said, they're still full-fledged vampires, still undead humanoids that have been reborn of the night and the grave with an insatiable thirst to prey upon the living. It says a lot about the vampire when even its lesser minions are still solid B-tier entries. Getting into high B-tier, we have the Alep. Similar to the Wraith and the Ghost, this is a shadowy, incorporeal undead. The defining trait that differentiates the Alep is madness. Specifically madness that came from it uncovering terrible secrets while it was alive. An Alep is created when a creature uncovers a secret protected by a powerful curse, resulting in its body being destroyed and its psyche transformed into this tormented, spectral being. In its anguish, an Alep seeks to share fragments of the secret that doomed it, causing temporary mental anguish and violent compulsions in those whom it tells. They might even become obsessed with uncovering more about the Allep's origin. An Allep can escape its curse by guiding a scholar to unknowingly transcribe its knowledge. Eventually, it passes on the curse to the next unwitting victim who discovers the hidden secret within the text. In other words, it's essentially a Lovecraftian ghost. At the top of B tier, we have the werebear, which is part of the lycanthrope cycle, along with the werewolf and others. It has 3 forms: a large bear, a medium humanoid, and a large bear-humanoid hybrid, with the hybrid form being what it's most well known for. Each form sort of has its own advantages, and overall, 5e makes lycanthropes fairly easy to run. Like the werewolf, the werebear cannot be harmed by weapons that aren't silvered, but it can be harmed by magical weapons and spells. Unlike the werewolf, and unlike most of the lycanthropes that tend to be evil or perhaps neutral, the werebear is typically good aligned. Typically they're neutral good. Something about a werebear's nature gives them a greater amount of control over their violent impulses. Werebears often act as wardens or guardians of their territories. They prefer solitude, which partly is an effort to protect others from their bestial nature, even though they are much less of a risk than, say, werewolves. And that concludes B tier, and the CR5 creatures are getting better and better. But get ready, my brave companions, as we are about to see some truly exceptional specimens that go above and beyond the majority of other bestiary entries. Bringing us right into mid-A tier is a creature that I actually have mixed feelings about, the Deep Dragon. I covered this guy quite a bit in my recent video about how the Purple Dragon, over the editions, especially in 5e, went from the most powerful dragon to the least powerful, retconned again and again until it's not even the same creature anymore. On the downside, the Deep Dragon has a googly-eyed appearance, no scales, no body spikes, not even fangs for crying out loud, and has been relegated to this weird limbo of being a true dragon, but not totally a true dragon. It's just this distant, lesser cousin of the chromatics, but at the same time, it's not a dragon kin like a wyvern or a drake. On the upside, it is pretty cool to have this quasi-cave salamander dragon with an Underdark layer, symbiotic fungus, and a nightmare breath weapon. I wish Fizban's Treasury of Dragons would have made proper entries for the rarer chromatics such as the purple, gray, and brown dragons, and the rarer metallics such as the iron, cobalt, and adamantine dragons. Then they could have also made this salamander dragon or fungus dragon thing that was just a dragon kin. This next monster is a freaky one. It's called the Mind Witness. When a beholder is stunned by mind flayers and brought to their elder brain's brine pool, it can be transformed into a mind witness, gaining tentacles and altered eye rays, and it becomes psychically devoted to the elder brain. A mind witness enhances the telepathic communication within a mind flayer colony, allowing it to relay messages between up to 7 creatures. If separated from its illithid masters, the Mind Witness seeks out other telepathic creatures to serve, potentially aligning with beings like demons, or even in rare cases, flumphs. It adopts the worldview of its new master. The Mind Witnesses are thus quite versatile telepathic intermediaries that adapt the influences of their current masters. Our next stop is at the Yuan-Ti Pitmaster. The Yuan-Ti are a fantastic villain kind of creature. Like orcs, Sahuagin, and drow, they are a whole race of monsters, and thus have quite a bit of different roles and variants, and some solid lore to boot. In fact, due to their many mutations and magic rituals of transformation, there are a high number of different kinds of Yuan-Ti, and some of them look pretty distinct. The Pitmasters are the Yuan-Ti Malison priests that have snakes for arms. They are devoted to awakening the god Mershalk through human sacrifices and adhering to traditionalist beliefs. They are essentially evil warlock/serpent priests with a variety of different spells and venomous snake bites from those crazy arms. They focus on strategically taking over humanoid governments and protecting their cities, advocating for a cautious and deliberate approach. Up next is the Drow Elite Warrior. It takes the base Drow from the 5e monster manual and gives it a multi-attack for 2 attacks, along with an upgraded short sword that also deals 3d6 poison damage on a hit, which, in true 5e fashion, seems to just be from some behind-the-scenes feature. He can also cast the Levitate spell once per day, and has an at-will parry reaction that he can use to increase his AC by 3 against an incoming attack. We also see he has proficiency with the 3 most common saving throws: Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom, as well as expertise in the Stealth skill. There's nothing too fancy here, but it's a great entry that builds upon the gritty and adventure-fueling lore of the Dark Elves. Now we come to one of the greatest undead monsters in all of 5e, and another classic trope from both folklore and media: the Revenant. I immediately think of movies that have striking Revenant characters, whether as protagonists or antagonists. Eric Draven from The Crow is easily my favorite. There's also the man and his lover that get cruelly murdered by drowning in Creepshow, and the hitchhiker from the lesser Creepshow 2. Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th series I would say is a Revenant. Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series could be a Revenant, though might just be a ghost. The Revenant ramps up the role-playing attribute to the max, essentially an entire adventure or even adventure arc built into a monster. It revolves around the Revenant avenging itself of its wrongful death, tracking down those who killed it, and bringing about their just demise. Exactly how putrid or grotesque a Revenant appears can vary, though they're generally described as being zombie-like, but with an intense glare of intelligence in their eyes. If you want strong motivation and human emotion in an undead adventure, the Revenant is for you. Marching into high A tier is the Bone Knight from the Eberron campaign setting. They are essentially a unique form of Dark Paladin. They were champions of the Order of the Emerald Claw, and when they took up their role, they were given this distinct bonecraft armor. Equipping this armor was a ritualized process that actually caused it to fuse to the Bone Knight's body, so they're in there for life. Initially, these devoted Karnathi paladins were appointed to control undead forces during the last war, with their bonecraft armor binding them for life and enhancing their divine abilities. After the war, King Caius III disbanded the Order of the Emerald Claw and sealed away most all of the undead. The Bone Knights thus were betrayed and abandoned. Still bound to their armor and still convinced of Karnathi's supremacy, they found new purpose in serving the sinister Lady Ilmaro. The Bone Knights continue on, controlling undead soldiers and maintaining their fearsome legacy. Next we have the Young Crystal Dragon. The Crystal Dragon is the least powerful of the gem dragons. They dwell in cold wastelands, building castle-like layers out of snow and ice. Alas, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to live in remote, frigid, inhospitable environments, as they are described as being so cheerful, so friendly and caring and welcoming. They have an innate psionic connection to the positive plane and are brimming with life, with positive energy. Yet they dwell in these desolate areas. They are highly optimistic and nurturing, and yet their alignment is chaotic neutral. This is a disconnect, as chaotic neutrals are scoundrels and rogues, mavericks and berserkers, not nurturing caregivers. Aside from these bizarre incongruencies, the Crystal Dragon is otherwise a great creature. It has a scintillating breath attack that deals radiant damage and grants the dragon temporary hit points. It can change shape and use short-range teleportation at will, and has some psionic spells like Divination, Hypnotic Pattern, and Restoration. It also has a legendary action called Starlight Strike that is a single target blast of radiance. Its layer actions are a charming whisper, an ice passage that opens up like a tunnel, and an area effect of radiant damage plus fairy fire. Like with all true dragons, the mechanics and the lore side of things is where the Crystal Dragon really shines. At the top of A tier, we have the adult Oblex, the midpoint in the Oblex cycle between the Spawn and the Elder. The Oblex is easily the most interesting ooze I've ever seen in an official bestiary. These are intelligent slimes created through mind flayer experiments. They are capable of preying on the minds of the creatures that they consume, gaining the thoughts and the memories of their prey. The adult and elder Oblexes can form copies of those they consume by creating duplicates of their victims, like slime puppets that they move around and control and perceive through. These simulacrums actually are the Oblex itself. They remain connected to the main body mass through a minuscule tether of slime. In this way, the Oblex can spy or lure more victims or accomplish all manner of different schemes. The adult also has innate spells such as Charm Person, Hold Person, and Detect Thoughts, which only further allow it to accomplish its devious goals. What an awesome bunch A tier is. These are some fantastic creatures, and each one is just ripe for storytelling and adventure. They're full of flavor and dynamic and have depth to them. There's just so much you could do with these monsters. And now we have reached S tier, the diamond that crowns this trove. There's only one CR5 creature here. I looked and I even asked around, but I could only find a single one. If you've watched many of my ranking videos, you know that S tier is quite a high bar in my book, and it takes a rare creature that has excellence in every aspect. I present here the Night Hag. This fiendish witch is primed to be the ultimate villain of a low-level campaign or adventure arc. She is obsessed with tragedy and corruption, which are two immensely compelling themes in storytelling. She enters her victims' dreams, planting seeds of fear and wickedness, sapping the target's strength and influencing it to commit evil deeds. The hag's ultimate goal is to lead the target to its demise and capture its soul in her bag of souls. This monster is definitely a long-term or recurring villain type monster. She has some decent offensive capabilities in direct combat, especially so if she has a coven, but she really shines over the course of time as she haunts the characters in their dreams and continually manipulates them, placing them in precarious situations in which they have to make difficult choices. The Night Hag is a foe that has the potential to be one of the most memorable ever by virtue of all her built-in hooks. I really wish there were more S-tier creatures at CR5. If you have the book Esper's Emporium of Esoterica, check out the creature called Spirit of the Feast, which I would consider S-tier. It has unique abilities and a haunting style that is also merry and at the same time nostalgic. It is as geared toward role-playing as a creature can get, and its lore leads to memorable scenes and adventure hooks. And the lore also includes a rhyming lyric poem. Challenge Rating 5 is full of great creatures. Many of them are time-honored classics in D&D and RPGs and fantasy in general. Even those that are in the lower tiers have their roles to play, and we wouldn't want to go without them. As I was creating this video, there were a number of times in which the nostalgia really hit me. Memories kept coming back to me from these monsters, memories of different times throughout my campaigns and experiences with different players. Some of the moments that came back to me were really simple things, like the first time I ever unleashed a boulette on my friends. It was the first time that it ever happened when this creature burst up from under the ground and surprise attacked them. Some of the moments really were several moments all strung together that spanned an entire campaign, such as in my Mirrormorn campaign that I livestream. There was an NPC, Corgain Makel, who was actually a young crystal dragon. He was an important NPC to the party and throughout the story, and he was even there with the party, fighting alongside them in the harrowing final dungeon of Voddenhold that lasted for several sessions. That's what these creatures mean to me. More than just stat blocks, more than just cool illustrations, more than just a game. They're memories to last a lifetime. Memories that I get to share with my friends and with you all. And I look forward to creating many more such memories, which is why I wish you all the best. And as always, may your adventures be many.